let's just imagine a hunter passionate about whitetail hunting, hunts public land or permission properties, and either gets the opportunity with where he has a permission property or has saved up and he's going to get that 40 in the place he loves to hunt. What are the first questions if he's looking to increase the whitetail habitat and increase the huntability of that property? What are the first questions you're coaching him through? The first questions he should be asking, or she should be asking?
Yeah. First thing I'm doing is I'm looking for limited resources. If you can find a limited resource in the area and hunt that at the appropriate time.
Welcome to episode 13 of the HUNTXP Podcast. Thanks for joining us. We got Jonny and I here, and we're joined by Ben. Welcome back, Ben. How you been?
Good.
What's been new? What have you been up to?
Building blinds on the off-season.
Hey-o.
Yep.
Nice.
Doing a little
You
scouting.
were showing us before you got on the call, but you got 2 blinds you're building right now?
Two
What are the
blinds.
blinds?
Maverick blinds. They're non-insulated, but they're injection molded. They're cool.
Nice.
Ben, where are they based out of? Wisconsin. Yes. Nice.
Very good.
Wisconsin. Yep.
What do you like about them? Why those over other ones? Just
Well,
curious.
the first time I've ever got them, assembled one of them in the process of the second one, and they seem like they're going to hold up. For me, if I want to move a stand, I like to be up high, 16, 18, 20 feet. And the blind itself is only 150 pounds, I think. Not exact, close.
Yeah.
150 pounds. So what I did is I made platforms at 16, 18 feet, and I can pull it up and put it up there, screw it down and done. And if I need to move it, I can do it again and without a tractor. Well, that's awesome. Yep.
Nice,
Yeah.
dude. Free shout out to you, Maverick. Way to go.
Yeah.
Well, we'll check back with you and see how they do next year in the field.
Yeah.
Sweet. Good.
Yeah. Other than that,
Good stuff.
Yeah. That's it.
Been catching fish. You've been sending me pictures of fish. I got to
have
get out
been.
on the lake with you.
Yeah.
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 You ice fishing now primarily, or are you still on the water?
Nope. Not on the water anymore. On the ice. Took a couple people out this past weekend, went lake trout and whitefish fishing, and we did okay. I did better than most, but we ended up
Nice.
collectively, we did well. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
If you ever get the chance to fish with Ben, he is very good at it.
He is. It's fun. He's very good.
Jonny, how you been, man?
Good. Yeah, life's good. We've been enjoying the big heat wave we've had this week after the negative 40-degree temps we just got over.
20 never felt so good, man.
That's right.
Well, I've got some fun things for us. It was fun to have Mel on the pod last week, man. We're getting a great response on that. A lot of interest in traditional bow hunting. So we'll try to have some more guests back on that talk a little bit more about that. And she's awesome. It'll be great to stay connected with her. As I said last week to you all, the pod community, we'd love your suggestions and even dropping in the comments. We had someone drop someone in the comments I'd never heard before, but we're going to ask them, who is another traditional bow hunter. If you've got suggestions on who should be on the HUNTXP pod, we want to hear them and we will ask. We have a lot of fun learning new things. So if it's someone we haven't heard from before, it'll be fun to learn that. We got a guest on tonight I have not met before, but have learned from already. It's Daniel from the GrowingDeer team. We're going to talk about land management. And I think even if you don't get the opportunity to manage land, you're still going to learn something about whitetail habitats that will cross over as you're scouting or walking through the woods. That team, GrowingDeer, Grant Woods, Daniel, is just a wealth of knowledge. So every time we get the opportunity to talk to one of them, we always learn something. So stick around. We'll hear a little bit more about his story. And I'm sure both these guys, Jonny and Ben, do land management either on their own properties or get asked about it frequently. So you're going to hear from a couple experienced guys and get questions from a couple experienced guys asking a very experienced guy in this topic. So hang out. But before we get there, got a couple things. Want to do Crockett news. Ben, we've been doing this with our AI that we've been developing, where we just ask, hey, Crockett, what's going on in the outdoor world news? So I got a piece of news for you. I want to get your opinion on it. And then we've got a question from the community that I also want to get your guys' opinion on. So first of all, Crockett News, number one thing, South Dakota passes a bill that bans trail cams on public land during the season. So what are your thoughts on this? Apparently some of the motivation is it's getting a little too easy, I guess was the vibe that I was getting, for people to have cell cams on public land. So they're going to try it and just wipe cell cams off public lands during the hunting season in South Dakota. What do you think?
Ben, you go first on this one.
Okay.
I have very little knowledge on South Dakota except for last year. And is that for whitetail, mule deer, everything, right?
I think it's just on public lands. I don't think they're all public lands during the deer season.
Okay.
You cannot have trail camps now.
Okay. To me, coming from the North Woods, going to South Dakota, it does seem like trail cameras would be cheating even. Like there's so little trees and patches of woods in areas where deer will go. I think that's probably maybe why they're doing it. I feel like it might be hating even more. I don't know.
It's saying because they don't have the density or they don't have the foliage we do, and it's easier to find the deer there.
Correct.
That like cell cams are even that much more of an advantage for the hunter. So they're just trying to scale back that advantage. So it's a little bit more quote unquote fair chase in some people's eyes. Yeah.
I've listened to a couple of podcasts in the past about, and the topic has come up about cell cams specifically. The theme that comes up a lot is that it's kind of the haves and the have-nots, right? If you have the means to have cell cams and the data plans, and I use cell cams, but if you have the means to use them, it sounds in some cases like it's borderline ridiculous. Like people will have on one ridge, they'll have like a cell camera every 50 yards or something like that. And not only is that a very distinct advantage over someone who does not have them, which again, it's like, well, sorry if you don't, but it's also something people brought up was like, it's like laying claim to your spot, even though it's public land. Many people are going to be respectful and like, well, I guess I'm not going to hunt here because there's this guy's cell cam. But if it's the same guy with 13 cell cams in one little strip of woods, like that's kind of unfair maybe. So maybe that's where they're coming from. I don't know.
Yeah, it's not passed yet. But if it does, I'll be interested to see what sort of response there is in South Dakota. Maybe if you hunt in South Dakota and you're listening to this, tell us what you think about it. If you think it's going to pass, and if it does, if you're excited about it, or if you're really ticked about it, let us know how it's affecting you. But it might be a cool sort of microcosm experiment to see if it actually affects kills at all. And I know it's just one factor. You can't really isolate it, but to look at it to see if it makes a difference. Essentially.
I know multiple states are talking about this.
Are they? Okay.
To clarify on my end, I like less rules than more rules. I
gotcha.
do feel like they should be able to do what they want to do, but I could maybe see where they're coming from. From the 1 year I hunted there, that it might be a little bit patch of woods here, bunch of cameras, like Jonny said, trying to lay claim to that little piece of woods.
Got it. There you go. There's Crockett News for this week. Thanks, Crockett.
Did you know that you can use AI to become a better hunter? Here's what you got to do. Our team at HUNTXP has built a custom AI. We call it Crockett. And it is the combination of the power of AI and the collective wisdom of hunters for many years mashed up together and put right in your pocket, right in the field where you can level up your hunting game. You can ask it things like, what's the best broadhead setup for my situation? What's the best day to hunt this week? All sorts of questions. You can take pictures of the snake you almost stepped on in South Dakota and say, is this a rattlesnake? That's something that actually happened to us. It's super fun. Our community's having a great time building this. We'd love for you to join in at huntxp.com. Join us.
So my question for you, I got a text message today from a fan of the pod. It was like, JD, I'm going to get into archery hunting this year, whitetail. Where do I start with a bow? And thank God I just now have a response that just says, well, ask Crockett. So I don't have to send you a big long text But I thought it would be fun to answer anyways and say, how would you respond to that question? I responded, but I'd love to hear how you guys think of it first. So in that question, there's a lot of layers. So you can go in whatever direction you want to, whether it's brand or how would you advise a friend who's getting into archery to find the bow that they're going to hunt with next year?
Can I go first, Johnny?
Yes,
Or
please
was
do.
that just because I don't want you to take my answer and I'm not good at this. So
Go ahead, Ben.
I would advise that person, wherever they live, to find the nearest place that specializes in a certain brand. Myself, I love Matthews. Love it. Won't ever leave. Love it. But I also I found a guy that I trust and he knows his stuff. And I know a lot about bows, but he knows way more. And that's who I stick with. So I feel like if you're going to go after a bow, find the nearest person in your location that knows the most about that and stick with them. And I think all bows are very good quality, but who you have giving you the information and teaching you and working on your stuff is
It's a big difference.
makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that answer, Ben. I would also say I would echo the fact that I think bows nowadays, like, pick any decent name brand and they have a nice bow that will shoot well. I think you have to answer the question first, and this comes off of what we talked about last week with Mel. Like, do you want to do traditional? Do you want to shoot a compound bow? Like, you have to answer that question first. But then I would agree with Ben, and I would say go to a shop or somewhere that's going to let you shoot bows. Like, there are many archery shops that they'll measure you and do all that stuff, and you can test the bows right there, and you can see what's comfortable for you. Which one do you shoot well? Which one do you like the feel of more? Because every bow feels a little bit different. I used to shoot a Hoyt, and now I shoot a Matthews, and I think I'm not knocking Hoyt. I loved my Hoyt bow. I just had an opportunity to buy a newer Matthews used from my uncle, and I really like it too. So I think there's value in being able to shoot a bow at a place and seeing if it's comfortable for you.
We all shoot Matthews, so super biased, obviously. I advise the same. I said, even if you're going to buy a used bow, which is a great route if you're being budget conscious, because you got to drop some serious money if you're going to get top of the line bow of anything right now. Any flagship, you're going to drop some serious money. But a way to get value is I encourage him to go shoot everything, at least like the top 3 that you're interested in, and see how they feel to you, because they're all going to feel weird for a new archer. And it's probably more about your adjustment to the bow than necessarily like rely on the quality that you're hearing about from places like this, but then determine what feels good for you. And if you're going to go for it, either go for the flagship, or I said, buy a new-ish bow within 3 years. Cause there's a lot of guys that do like get everything new. And it's different markets too. So we have a lot of people in the Twin Cities area down here that buy a brand new bow and then they sell it in 3 years with everything on it and then do it all over again. So you can get a pretty high quality bow with all the expensive accessories attached to it at a discount and still get about the same amount of quality too. So
Yeah, for sure.
there you go. That's how you buy a bow. Let's do it. What you shouldn't do is borrow your friend's bow and try to hunt with that.
Never.
Don't do that.
Also, to add to that, because that's a great point. It doesn't matter what sort of bow you get. For every bow hunter in the woods, you need to shoot your bow and you need to practice.
Yes.
Please practice. Just do it. That's bow hunting. Get out, shoot your bow every other day. If not, rifle hunt. That's what you need to do. If you're not going to practice bow, shoot a rifle.
Right.
And then
If
we've
you're-
talked about this on the pod before, but you owe it to the animal to practice.
For sure.
You owe it to the animal.
Yeah, and don't get discouraged because you'll suck at it at first, even if you get a fancy one. You know, like you're gonna mess until you get your rhythm down and your habits down. I also advised, this may be a different opinion than you guys. I told the guy to don't go overboard on the poundage. Like, don't get what you think you can pull back, because you can always amp it up later. I said, go even 10, maybe 15 pounds lower, because you should be firing a lot of shots through that bow, and you want more quality, not strange shots as you're learning how to shoot the bow. And in most whitetail situations, this is just my opinion, but you want longer draw period than you do faster arrow, in my opinion. So like the difference in arrow speed between like 80 pounds and 70 pounds isn't as much of a value, I don't think, than being able to hold that bow back and make an accurate shot for an extra minute or two in most actual hunting scenarios. So just a little tidbit that I offered him, because I think a lot of guys will be like, I think I can do 80. I'm just going to do it's just not worth it in the scheme of things. All right. Well, you guys ready for Daniel? Should we bring him on the pod?
Let's bring him on the pod.
Hey, Daniel.
Hey, Daniel.
What's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing well. You guys are cutting me off on the fourth quarter of the Chiefs game.
I was wondering if you were a Chiefs fan. Are you a Chiefs fan?
I'm not a big Chiefs fan, but my wife is a big Packers fan. But we got the game on.
Ooh.
Getting pretty crazy. We were watching.
Yeah.
There you go. We are really striking out with inviting guests on when their teams are playing. The first time was with Michael Mansell, who's also a Packer fan from Breaking Point TV. Like right in the middle of a Packer game is when we had set up, and thank God for DVR. And then Cody Kraut, who's also a Packer fan, like right in the middle of the game again. And then John Eberhardt right in the middle of the Lions game.
Yeah, we're
and
just
now
terrible.
You, right in the middle of the Kansas City game. So we're on fire. Yeah.
No worries.
We're so glad to have you.
For having me. I'm excited to be here.
That's awesome, man. Hey, for our audience who might not know you, can you just go ahead and introduce yourself to us?
Yeah, Daniel Mallette. I work with Grant Woods on GrowingDeer.com. We produce a weekly-based show every week on YouTube and social media. Really, what I really enjoy doing is talking to landowners and hunters and helping them develop really good habitat so they can have better hunting. And of course, that's not only what we film and do at our place, but we also travel across the Whitetails range and do site visits and look at habitat and really dive one-on-one with landowners on their specific properties. Really enjoy working with landowners, hunters, all about whitetail and a bunch of other critters. So kind of what I do.
Yeah, man. You can tell already you're very passionate about it, which is exciting. I'm excited to get into it. But first of all, I got to ask you, what is that hanging on your wall behind you? Tell us the story of that thing.
Thank you, Rep.
I know there's a lot of things, but yeah. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so a
Yeah.
couple of years ago, my buddy and I, we were trying to plan a caribou hunt and looking at Alaska, and we started diving in like, man, this thing's going to come. Somehow we followed this rabbit hole down, and we ended up in Greenland and chasing caribou. I guess they call them reindeer. And then we added on a muskox hunt, so it was a really good hunt.
So are both of the caribou you have behind you and that from that trip?
Yeah.
Or is the caribou? Dude.
Caribou right there.
Yeah.
Actually, my buddy and I, we were tagged out on the first day in both caribou and muskox. So
wow, that's phenomenal.
In Greenland.
Yeah.
Wow. Dude, that's cool.
It was beautiful.
Well, I already know what we're going to ask you back for round 2 of the podcast to hear about how to successfully hunt in Greenland and tag out on the first day with Daniel. Yeah. That's great, dude. Well, let's start this way, man. I think there's let's just imagine a hunter passionate about whitetail hunting, hunts public land or permission properties, and either gets the opportunity with where he has a permission property or has saved up and he's going to get that 40 in the place he loves to hunt. What are the first questions if he's looking to increase the whitetail habitat and increase the huntability of that property? What are the first questions you're coaching him through? The first questions he should be asking, or she should be asking?
Yeah. First thing I'm doing is I'm looking for limited resources. I mean, that's it. Maybe you just have permission to hunt or you're hunting on public land. You can't improve the habitat or anything. But if you can find a limited resource in the area and hunt that at the appropriate time, you're going to see deer. And that changes throughout the season, right? Food sources are changing. It may be droughty, early season and water may be a limited resource. You get fall rain and water's a non-issue for the rest of the season, right? So it's all relative to what deer need at that specific window of time that you can hunt that property. And that carries over into when you're creating habitat. First thing you can do is if you can identify the limited resource in the neighborhood and you can put that on that property, improve the habitat, you're gonna, all of a sudden that's a low hanging fruit. You're gonna make a jump up in seeing deer in the area. So that's the number one thing I'm looking for right off the bat. And you may do that just on an aerial map, looking at public ground. But then you're ground checking it. You're putting boots on the ground and you're spending some time finding that resource. Again, that changes real quick in the whitetail world. I mean, you may have this big white oak that's just dropping acorns 3 days before all the other trees in the area, and that's the feed tree. Well, then a big wind comes through and knocks off acorns. Now there's acorns everywhere. So, I mean, we're talking, 24 hours, things can change really quickly. And you got to be able to adapt and move around.
Got it. Can you rattle off for us, generally in the Midwest, what are some of those limited resources that hunters should be ticking the boxes of as they do the process of evaluating in their area what limited resource they could bring to their property that would create a attraction?
Most people in the Midwest, water is rarely, it's a non-issue for the most part, unless we're really droughty, like this year, we kind of had some historic type droughts or, it was really weeks on week, kind of droughts. Then for a short window of time, water can come into play. But I'm not spending a lot of time going, I got to find water, or does this property have water on it? Because a lot of times there's seeds and, there's little holes where they're holding water that you won't ever find the critters know. So I'm not probably spending as much time on water, but the big thing is food and finding the food. In the Midwest, there can be a lot of crops and all this we call, corn annual forest. I mean, there's cover and food right there, and then boom, overnight there's nothing. So again, food can change real quick. But deer have to consume a lot of food every day. Round number, some people estimate somewhere between that 5 to 7% of their body weight every day. There's studies there, and that kind of varies throughout the whitetail's range. But easy math, 100-pound doe has to eat 5%, 5 pounds. You're thinking, and I'll stop you there because it's not 5 pounds, right? 70% of that vegetation is water weight for the most part. So they've got to consume close to 15, 17 pounds of food every day just to maintain health. And now you're talking about 200-pound buck. I mean, they've got to eat a lot every day. So food is really the big resource I'm looking for because that's going to get you through that entire hunting season window. And now I can find that food source as it's changing. You're going to carbs, finding that feed tree, that acorn tree that's pouring down acorn, a few days before other trees, or, you know, for some reason there was a late frost in the spring, and the white oaks didn't make acorn. Now we've got to scramble and find some native browse that they're feeding on. If they're not feeding on crops or something like that. So now, if that happens, what you can do to supply food is you're gonna go to produce a food plot. And if you can produce a food plot that's green through hunting season, that can get you a long way. And native browse too goes a long way. You never need tons per acre when you're creating native habitat for browse, but you can really use up more of your acres probably. it's easier to maintain a lot of acres of native habitat because food plots they can get expensive if you're doing a big scale or something. So yeah, food is probably the big one I'm looking for, and the biggest one I could really control to a lot of degree throughout the whole hunting season.
Yeah. I'm curious, Ben and Johnny, how that resonates with your guys' process so far and what you've learned about finding that limited resource in the Northwoods.
Well, everything I have learned about food plot has been from Ben, so I will defer to him in a moment. But I mean, yeah, I have Daniel. So you're familiar. I have 50 acres that I own. 13 acres is field, and it's just hay field. A farmer comes and makes hay, and then 37 is woods. And Ben and I cleared an area. It's like a third acre or something. We cleared an area, and we've done kale, we've done clover, we've done turnips. This past fall, it was just clover because of time. But the amount of deer that I have seen stay on my property as a result of that has been, exponential. It's been awesome just putting a food source on my property. And I think inherently I knew that, but like seeing it in action on my own piece of property has been really cool.
And I assume that it's pasture around you and then woods, right?
There's a lot of woods around me. There is some pasture to the south a little bit, but yeah.
So that's a great example. You provide a limited resource, and for that size, are we feeding deer the entire year, and are they thriving off that? Quite candidly, no. I mean, it's the old, you don't have to be faster than the bear, just faster than Ben, right? Okay?
Right.
Not picking on the Ben. But, right? You have something green when no one else around you has that, and that's the resource, and that's when you're seeing a lot more deer activity.
Right. To add to that, like for Johnny's place, similar to mine, it's not always about how much food you can make for the deer year round. It's just trying to get those deer there before it gets dark, before they move to the next larger feeding area. So for Johnny's place, especially, I think you have a little more than a third of an acre, right?
Yeah,
it might be a
couple.
Yeah, it's somewhere in 3/4. But then with your the field they're feeding in, you're kind of catching them in between, which is really cool. He has a good setup, which similar to me, I try to provide as much food as I can, but yet I'm not going to feed all the deer in my area at that spot all the time. I'm just trying to get them before they get further up to the next guy.
And that's the key too. It's not just putting food on the property. It's the design. Can you hunt it in a way where you can have those daylight encounters with the deer? And that it's not just putting a limited resource or finding a limited resource. Now I kind of joke a lot of times, we may say we're going to put a food plot here. You're hunting the food plot, but we may be 100 yards, on a bottleneck, cutting deer off before they get to the food plot. You're still hunting the food source, but you have to back off to give you more of a chance to maybe catch that deer on his feet during daylight shooting hours. And that design is huge.
So is that where, Daniel, kind of the next phase is identifying kind of the three, maybe it's not three, maybe it's four or more, but the key areas that I'm picking up as I'm learning more about this are obviously food source, transition or pinch points, and then bedding. Is that kind of what you're coaching people to try to identify on that land or around it next? Is that kind of your next stuff?
So let's go back just a little bit. So we have food, we have water. Cover is the other resource that we're thinking about, and I'll add in there security. Deer need security. You could have really good food, you could have really good cover, but if deer don't feel safe there, they're not going to use it during daylight. You could have an area that's a sanctuary and you just don't go into, and it's for a property. You have a little 40 and everyone hunts all around you, and you don't go in that property during shotgun season. Now that's a limited resource. That's only 40 acres. No one's going in and hunting. So security can go a long way. And you've probably seen this where it's thick, skinny, big cut, maybe a bunch of maples growing up, and you're thinking, man, that's where all the deer are. It's great cover. It's not great cover for deer, great habitat, but it's where they feel safe because no hunter's going in there or can slip in there um, to see or effectively hunt. And if someone does go in there, deer, they can hear you coming from a mile away and they know to scoot out. So those are the things I'm really looking for. And then within that, yeah, I want to, especially if you're a bow hunter, you have to get that deer within, 20, 30 yards. You have to find the pinch point. Those travel corridors or pinch points, deer are traveling between those resources. That becomes really key to getting within range of deer.
Totally. Anything more you want to say on how to identify within, like, if you're planning a food plot, do you have any general guidance on like what to consider planting so that you in different regions have that limited resource? I know, and maybe Ben and Jonny, you can speak to this. You've mentioned a few crops already. I know, Ben, you're a big fan of turnips in our area. Speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, blends are going to do the best. If you can have a blend of species where something has become palatable throughout, weeks on end, turnips, you can plant turnips. Yeah, they can hit them early, but then if they browse them to the ground or, they totally wipe them out early, now you have no food. Maybe they don't make bulbs. Or they wipe them out early and they kind of come back and they have some bulbs, but they don't hit those bulbs until later in the season after, you get a really hard frost or snow and kind of starts breaking down those carbohydrates or sugar. If you can have a blend that something is palatable every week, the further you can go, that's the key. And it's not a monoculture, XYZ. It's a blend. Again, it doesn't take much. We need something green coming on. So we always like to have, a blend of brassicas, radishes, turnips. Have your cereal grain. You might have some oats early on. They may winter kill, but early on, high sugar content. That's really attractive early on. Winter wheat, cereal rice, the coldest growing forage. It's growing and putting on new growth, down to 28 degrees. So when you're talking winter food, these are big because we need those calories. And now, not only to attract you, but also to help that health as well. The longer you can get food, maybe you plant. If you're able to plant acres, you've got soybeans all around you. If you can plant some soybeans and they're able to mature and produce pods, and then you can broadcast into that. Now you have standing grain and grains underneath. Now we're talking about some really attractive food.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to us a little bit. Give us like the 3 biggest mistakes that people who come in and try to do this to a piece of land make as they start to like implement this plan.
I think a lot of people, they don't have a good plan. So they just kind of, they hear something online or something and they, say, well, I'm going to do it here, but they don't think about the hunting strategy, how it's really going to hunt. It's really big to be able to approach, hunt, and exit without alerting deer. Because deer have incredible memory. And so they learn if you alert deer, they can learn where their stands are, right? And you can burn stands out really quick. And this is especially true if you're hunting small pieces. You've got to be, very careful about not alerting deer. 20 acre, 40 acre, and again, learn real quick, hey, there's a hunter here. I'm not coming on the property until after dark, even if it's got great food, right? So that's probably one of the big ones. And then really, I'd say mistake number 2 is a lot of people don't harvest enough does for their habitat, so they may try to improve the habitat, and they don't do a great job of balancing the herd with their habitat. And again, we can either improve the habitat to hold more critters, or we can decrease, if we only have again, deer have to eat a lot of food. So if we only have a acre plot, well, to get us through the whole hunting season, we may have to shoot more does, take those mounds off to allow that food plot to grow a bit so we can hunt it in December. So we have to either increase the food, harvest more does, or do a combination of both. And I think those are probably the two big ones are people just don't manage with the deer herd. Deer, they're fairly easy to manage, but we don't think like humans. We don't think like deer. And the more we can do that, and probably mistake number 3 is we get caught up in our own mind and maybe we overthink some things or we don't think things through to the effect of how's it going to impact their movement. And that's a big one that a lot of not only managers but hunters get caught up in.
Good stuff. Ben and Johnny, do you have questions at this point?
Yeah. So you talk about managing the doe herd. What would you say is like a healthy buck to doe ratio on a property? Doesn't matter the size, but like typical buck to doe ratio, what are you looking for?
The healthiest is a 1-to-1. That's the way God's created it. If you've got like a 45, buck or percent buck or doe, right? That's farm recruitment. That's way off. That's big. It's supposed to be close to a 1-to-1, but we harvest pretty heavy on bucks in a lot of areas, and we can start seeing those doe populations grow. And that's what it's supposed to be. And a true healthy herd is an older age class deer. And there's a lot of good things that go on when you have those older age class bucks in the herd, priming the rut, rutting behavior you're seeing. If you're not seeing a lot of scrapes and rubs, you probably have a younger herd. A lot of scrapes and rubs are indicators of older age class bucks. So there's a lot of things there. For most folks, they don't shoot enough does. They have too many does for the habitat. Again, it's not how many deer you have, it's how much habitat you have to support the deer. So in some areas, gosh, you could have 150, 200 deer per square mile because you have great habitat. In other areas, 10 may be too much for the habitat. I mean, it's just balance.
That makes sense. Yeah.
That's good. Go for it.
All right. To add to what he said, he was talking about like food and the habitat for the number of deer that you're trying to get on your property. And a lot of people are like, well, how do you know? How do you know if you have too many deer or too many does I didn't know originally, like, well, I don't even know. So I started making food plots and they were eaten down. And I was like, well, am I a terrible farmer? So I learned, I was like, okay, I was doing some reading and it said, hey, put a fence up around a little area, see what your deer are actually eating. And that was huge because I thought I was doing a bunch of things wrong with planting. Well, I put the fence up and sure enough, I got around like inside the fence. It was great. It was, my turnips, my clover, everything was growing great. Blends, mixes, grains. I do like how he said grains. I love the grains, but they were all in the fence. They were much higher and you can really see what the deer are actually eating. And then you're like, okay, well, hey, I might have to get rid of some does. I have to either get more food or shoot some does around here because the food plots are just getting tore up and deer moving away.
Yeah, utilization cages are probably the easiest and most important tool a deer manager can implement on the property. And those cages, they need to be, at least 4 feet high and, 3 feet, 4 feet wide. Because a deer has an 11-inch tongue, so they can, if it's got big, holes like cattle panel, they can stick their nose in there, wrap their tongue around it, and they pull it out. this is going to be the best forage. And so they're always trying to get in there. I've seen packers where they knock the cage, they try to knock the cage over just to feed in there. And that is a huge, huge tool that land managers can use to know how much of that grocery are they supplying to deer. And again, it varies year to year. You know, you have a heavy acorn, your food plots don't get browsed. And you're thinking, wow, okay. And then all of a sudden, all the acorns are consumed, and boom, your food plots are wiped out overnight. So you have to also, you know, put that into context of what's going on in the neighborhood and year to year.
Yeah. So for up north, just to add, you got to make those fences strong. We have a lot of bears, and the bears just tear up everything. So just one pointer, make them tough. Those bears will
Make them strong.
make them strong.
Yeah,
Make them
and you don't want deer, if you're really wanting healthy deer, you don't want deer browsing down the pile on the ground, because that's a zone where a lot of parasites are living. And so when deer are feeding down there, cattle guys know the same true for cattle, right? If they're in that zone and they're consuming that forage, because that's the only thing out there, well, they're going to take in more parasites, and those parasites are going to, you know, result in lower quality deer, the health, and it trickles down to their health. We know this from pin raised deer. They shoot them up with ivermectin from studies and all this, and they remove the parasites, boom, like that. 15% antler increase, just removing parasites, that one thing.
Yes.
Parasites are huge. Deer, they have that really narrow, I mean, here's the muskox, right? It's got this real broad muzzle, right? And when it was out there, it was just, you know, feeding, and it was just taking it all up. Deer have that really narrow nose, and they are concentrate select feeders, and they're kind of finicky. And so they're going through, and they want to pick and choose the best forage. They can sense which leaves, even on the same plant, which leaves have the nutrient content that they need at that moment. Deer are really cool because their bucks can store those nutrients in their skeletal system, and then throughout the year, and then when they go into antlergenesis, they can mobilize those nutrients to go into antlers. So you want, for really good deer, health overall, and this goes into antlers, you want habitat and forage. The deer are picking the best and leaving the rest. That's going to result in the healthiest deer.
So let's get into that a little bit. If I'm understanding right, you're not just thinking food plots, then you're thinking about how you develop the health of the forage and the habitat outside of those areas as well for year-round nutrients. So talk a little bit about what a land manager can do to increase that quality around them.
Well, the biggest thing that a land manager can do is get sunlight to the ground. Deer, quail, turkey, all the critters, they live off photosynthesis. What they're eating. So that 0 to 3 feet, that zone, we call it the habitat zone. You have to get sunlight to the ground. If all that sunlight's getting caught up in timber, in the trees, and it's not getting it to the ground. And that, it may be native habitat, it may be ag field, right? Because that's photosynthesis at ground level, beans, food plots. Native habitat for a lot of folks, they may have terrain, or there may be some areas that, you know, they can't effectively hunt or get to. You know, they may be across the river, and they can't get equipment in there to plant food plots. For most folks, a vast majority of their acre just can't be managed. Maybe it's a budget, can't be managed for food plots. But if they can open up a canopy and get sunlight to the ground with native habitat, now those acres are productive. And they can get native habitat, you can get both food and cover. And that's big. You can't produce as many tons per acre in native habitat. And when I say native habitat for food, I'm thinking broadly. Think wildflower, you know, broadleaf. When you're probably seeing Jonny deer out in the cattle pasture, they aren't eating the grass. They don't have the gut to really digest wild grass. They're probably eating the clover that's growing in that pasture
Right.
or some other broadleaf. And so that's what you're looking for. Ragweed. If you have ragweed, oh my God, that's incredible for deer. 20+% protein when it's palatable at the right time of the year. I mean, that's a soybean. And we all think, man, that's just a weed. Our allergies hate it. You have some in your fruit plot, you're like, oh my gosh, my fruit plots look terrible. Well, that's incredible deer food. And again, if you have more acres of that, deer can pick and choose. That takes some pressure off your food plot. Uh, native habitat goes a long way. And I'll use the native habitat too as that cover. Again, deer want the grass because grass can reflect that that radiant energy from the sun. It kind of bounces back and forth and it shears the wind. So you may look out in this grassy area and think, man, they're open, no deer wants to be out there. But when they need that radiant energy, that sunlight again, it's not to the ground. When they need to stay warm, it's almost like sitting in your car on a cold day, right? It starts getting warm because that radiant energy. And deer, they're making a living there. And so you get that cover and that food, that goes a long way for deer.
Yeah. So when you're walking grounds with landowners, what are you looking for, like mature hardwoods to open up those sort of areas in that, or what are the kind of
It's site specific, right? We're going down what's in the neighborhood. First thing we're doing is what's the easiest thing we could add to this property? What's our limited resource we could add to the property just to take its utmost level? And then we're prioritizing. Say, all right, if we do this, we'll see a bump. If we do step 2, we'll start to move the right direction, starting to move that needle. Some properties, they just don't have just the way it lays or the management of it doesn't fit. We may not do habitat. I mean, want as much as you can, but sometimes we have to just say, this is going to be too hard to manage, for the acres or how it lays. We don't want to open it up and the neighbors stand on the line and be able to look over the whole property, right? So there's a lot of design that goes into that. And that's where really walking the property and kind of putting these principles of what deer need into a well-designed plan. So it's really tough to give just generalizations of what's happening. It's site specific. Every property is different. Every property has good things and bad things, and we kind of have to work with what we got a lot of times.
I think, yeah.
Totally.
I was just going to say, to what he was saying, I think the biggest thing is when you look at a property, you can't look at it as just one piece of property. You got to look at it as different sections, food, bedding, all that, like transition, all the stuff he's talking about. It's just not one big area where you want to, make it all food or make it all open or whatever. You got to break it up.
I'm also gathering too that it's much larger than just the property that you have, right? It's the properties around that as well. And I like the thought of going into a property with the thought of what is the limited resource and how can I make something more available on this property that was before not available here, How can I increase something that a deer wants that previously was not here?
Yeah, I think that goes back to a mistake mistake that some people make is they only look at their property and they don't think about what's going on in the neighborhood. Remember, a deer's home range, very few properties have deer living and dying on that property. There's always going to be going on and off. And everyone wants more land and everyone talks about neighbors. Everyone has that problem, right? So after really learn what's in the neighborhood, is there a big food source on the neighbor? If you made good cover and you have a good approach that you can swing around and that they have to go out there to feed, well, you may have great hunting just creating good cover and cutting them off. So yeah, it is also looking and seeing what's going on in the man. We're all kind of selfish. We want to see deer. So you want to, especially during the hunting season, you want to have a leg up on your neighbor. I'm not really concerned about, well, do they have summer food? If you have, a little 20 or 40 acre piece, quite honestly, you're not probably going to be able to provide enough summer food to hold deer and feed deer all summer on your property. It's going to leave. But what can I do for the fall? And that's goes a long way.
Talk to us a little bit about bedding areas and how would you improve that on your property if you diagnose in your plan that you want to improve cover, and either enhance the bedding area that you already have, or it's situated among the other neighboring properties to provide a good bedding area. And we've even in previous podcasts, if you're thinking about November, if you're thinking about rut, those bedding areas are very crucial and untouched bedding areas. So how do you maybe diagnose if that's a good thing to pay attention to on your property, and B, how do you enhance that if that actually is a limited resource during that phase of hunting season?
Got to go back to thinking like a deer, right? Deer have to get up and move to meet their needs for bedding. They're cold. They need to get up. They need to go to sunlight. They want to get out of the wind. They need to get in grass to steer that wind. They get too hot. They're going to shit. They're getting up and moving to shade. Deer are constantly moving throughout the day, bedding around, right? So, we throw out the word, bedding, and for deer, that can change, within a few hours, throughout the day, throughout the seasons. You could have really good summer bedding where there's, some shade because it's warmer and maybe it's kind of swampy and there's water and enough moisture to grow some native browse. And you have great bedding during the summer, but gosh, during fall, there's nothing, right? So it really goes back to thinking like a deer, what deer need. And I always go back to, if we're going to create cover, a lot of times we want that throughout the hunting season. And so, because we're also thinking the rut, does. Accepted does are going to seek the best cover to get away from pesky bucks where, the bucks is with and tend her and they can kind of get off by themselves away from, other deer. So we want really good cover during that time. And then in the spring, we also want really good cover for farming and nesting season too. But again, it's sunlight to the ground, and we have to manage that through fire. So it doesn't matter. Deer could care less if there's a tree. The thing a tree is doing is if it's an oak and it's dropping acorns or dropping some soft mass, the deer could care less if there's a tree. That's zero to tree feet. So if you have an old pasture, old cattle pasture, that's like a blank slate. You can just almost snap your fingers and we can get some great cover. We can spray that and get fire in there and burn at the appropriate time. If it's a pasture, it's probably, over time it's been planted or the farmers brought hay in and weed seed is falling. So we gotta get on top of that. Some mismanagement on that side. But for the most part, we can spray it, kill what's there, get sunlight to the ground, and let those native species that are in the soil. A lot of places have these native species already in the soil. You don't have to plant anything. They just need enough sunlight again to grow. And those species are way better than anything you could ever plant because they have grown there for many, many years, and they have developed just for that site. The soil conditions, the aspects of the land, the sun, they are for that site. So that's easy action. If you're in timber, you're all timber, we got to kill some trees. And that's a balance of what is good for the landowner too. Does he want the timber value? Are we clear cutting? Are we doing a selective harvest? Um, there's a lot of things that go into play there, but in timber, you've got to cut some trees. You need about 50% or so sunlight getting to the ground, have enough sunlight to grow that native vegetation. And then we have to manage it with tell folks a lot of times, if you're not committed to that follow-up with the fire, sometimes some of these projects, you'll end up, a year or two down the road, and it'll be worse off than it is. And you've used a lot of valuable resource along the way, time and money and whatnot. You got to, when you're going into, especially the cover, you really have to have a good plan of, this is what you're doing, and you've got to be committed to following up that maintenance phase. Because nature doesn't like a void. And it's going to, if you don't do it right, it's going to fill up with, a million stems over time. And within your lifetime, you're never probably going to see that, come back to a mature forest. So you gotta have a real thought out plan when you're going into that cover area. We do that with fruit plots. We don't really think about it, but we're spraying and we're planting something that's out competing the weeds. There's management there keeping those things down, but native habitat can get away pretty quick within, just a few years if you're not careful. And talking about fire, burning at certain times of the year at different times of the year results in different vegetation. The late winter or dormant season will favor more grasses. Of course, grass is matured, and a lot of grasses will still be standing and have seed, right there, and you burn that, and that seed falls and right on black, and it makes great soil contact. You have a great seed bed for that seed to grow, and you get kind of heavy in grass. And again, we don't want to be just dominated by grass. We want that food in there too to grow some deer and provide forage. So we also have to not only burn during the dormant season, but start burning in our rotation. Late summer burn. And there's not a bad time to burn. Burn when God will burn. When there's enough fuel to carry the fire and the conditions are right to carry fire. So if you burn in May, you're going to have different species respond than if you burn in June or July. For most folks, you have to kind of wait. A lot of times in the Midwest, the humidity gets high, early spring, going in early summer. We have to wait until, sometimes July, August, for that humidity drops down. We get a few weeks to dry out to carry that fire. But there's not a bad time to burn. But we have to rotate between those. And if you have a large enough property, if you then break it up into sections, ideally we never want to burn all our native habitat at the same time, because then that just wipes everything out. There's no food or cover on the property. So if we take 10 acres here, 10 acres there, and we burn this one during the dormant season, this one during the growing season, or the next year, always have some stage of food and cover on the property, and never clean that slate.
That's good. A good portion of our audience are from the context that Ben and Jonny are joining us in, which has a lot of pines, spruce. So Ben, I think you had a question about this, about bedding cover and how to manage with those sorts of, not just hardwoods, but that sort of context.
Yeah.
How would you ask that?
I guess from like up north, we got a lot of logging going on. So you have popple, like a lot of popple slashes. You got big oak timber where you don't have sunlight. And deer will summer up in certain areas. And then guys will be like, oh, all my deer left. Like fall hits and all the deer are gone and leaves drop. And so they move all around. So the biggest question I always get is, how do you keep deer on your land throughout all 4 seasons? If you have a large enough piece, or even if you don't, what's the best type of bedding cover and thermal cover to plant for trees? I'm currently in the process right now. I'm trying to plant like 6,000 pines this summer on our piece, where to try to position it in like bedding areas and pieces to hold the deer in. But in your area or in your experience, what's the best tree that you know of?
There's not.
Oh,
Again,
okay.
deer could care less of it.
Yeah.
You want to keep that ground open. If you're going for really good deer habitat, you want to keep that ground open enough where you can get growth on the ground.
Okay.
That is the key. And again, you're talking year round. You get you get grasses in there. That is your, late winter type cover, sharing the wind, the radiant energy, keeping deer warm. During the summer, the forb are great forage for deer. And then they're gonna go, lay under a tree or, down in the swamp or whatever to get out, maybe out of the sun on those days. And that's a very small window of time. Think about if I said, that you can go anywhere to hunt, right? Let's go. Let's book a trip this fall, all of us. Let's go share camp somewhere. I'll take you anywhere you want. Where are we going? If I said wherever you want, where are we going?
I'm gonna say Iowa or Kansas.
Yeah, for sure.
Not many trees out.
Yeah.
And it's great food. We always think food. It's great food, but you think okay, well, what are they doing for winter, right? I mean, if there's a lot of in areas that are managed well, they're burning great, maybe CRP, or there's a lot of grasslands in there too. Oklahoma, western Oklahoma, western Kansas, they don't in those areas, they don't have even ag, and they're growing, 180, 190 class deer on native vegetation.
Two things are popping into my head right now with that. And the first being a previous conversation we had with Michael Mansell, who will hunt in North Dakota in late season and no trees, right? And he says they're coming out of the deer are bedding in these marshes with these tall grasses. The other thing, and I think it's kind of what Ben's referring to, is we'll get pummeled with snow up here, right? In the winter where, multiple feet of snow in the woods. And I would imagine maybe this is what Ben's referring to, but I can walk my property and some other properties I have access to. And in years where there is tons of snow, without fail, if you find a stand of pines, there are beds everywhere in those pines. And like around there, nothing. But if it's in the pines on years where there's tons of snow, there's always deer in there. I don't know if that's where you were going with Ben, but that's what came to my mind when you were talking about the pines.
Yeah. So
and that's cool.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, they're constantly moving.
Yep.
When we're talking
it's shelter from the snow. It's shelter. Yeah.
Most days out of the year, though, it's all about sunlight.
Sure, that makes total sense.
And if you get, if you don't have snow and there's grass there, and you go to those pines, go lay under one of those pines. It's shady. It's cold under there. Cold. And we're talking hard winters. If they have the option to be out in that sunlight, they're going out there. Because they have to conserve those calories.
That's good. Any other questions coming to mind for you guys, Jonny or Ben?
I had a question earlier too. It was just kind of so I know this is your living. It's what you study. I've had the privilege of meeting Dr. Grant Woods as well at a conference and hearing from him, and he might have provided some, but it's been a couple of years. But do you have any like data or what you've seen from, hey, we started doing a little bit of land management here and we've seen X amount of increase? Like, do you have any statistic like that?
I think a great example is Grant's property.
Okay.
The original piece, he just recently sold it, was about 1,500 acres, and it's in southern Missouri, and you never hear of anyone saying, man, we're going to southern Missouri to hunt, big whitetail. Right? I've never heard anyone say it. And in this area, until when Grant bought the property, if I remember, I think there were only maybe one, maybe two deer that were recorded poking young. Of course, there were probably bigger deer that just weren't recorded. But as we, really put in a lot of food and did a lot of habitat work, at one point we were up to close to 90 acres of food plot that we were managing.
Ace.
Over 500 acres of native habitat. We had multiple 170, multiple ones. And that changed. I mean, it takes years. It takes generations. It takes about 3 generations for you to see the full extent of that, right? And then you have to have that third generation buck grow out to, 4 or 5 years of age. Right? It's a natural process. It takes time, but it can be done. And we just, Ozark Mountains dominated by a close country before. It was, high graded years ago. It's just, you're going to look down the entire mountain. It's just nothing but leaflet on the ground. Except for acorns, there's nothing. And we took that and are growing 170. We harvested them. Our neighbors harvested a couple deer that we knew, and they scored them out in, 160s, 170s. Some deer that were even bigger, without a doubt, that unfortunately we just never caught up with. But that's a great example. And we see that with a lot of clients at the Whitetail Zone that actually implement good habitat and deer management. They, within a few years, they're seeing big results.
It's awesome. Yeah.
And
Ben, do you have any other questions?
Add in there. So and this plays into this, all about groceries, right? In the 60s, when Missouri was restocking deer, they pulled deer just a few miles from Grantwood, very close, and they took them to northern Missouri. Genetically, these deer are the same. Everyone wants to go to northern Missouri to hunt. That's where the groceries are. There's more soybeans produced up there, more sunlight reaching the ground, and they grow whopper deer, and people want to go there. Genetically, they're the same. And so it's not genetic. The one thing that hunters can control is they can add more groceries, and they can control their trigger finger. And if deer can get old, even if you're shooting young deer, per age class, you can start seeing those shifts. 2-year-olds start looking really good. And what we've noticed for people that are really into this and are doing a great job, what they start doing sometimes is because they're used to seeing these, low quality deer, and they're like, man, I want to shoot a good 3-year-old or whatnot. Maybe that's their harvest goal. I want to shoot a 3-year-old. They start sending us pictures, a few years down the road, and they go, man, this one's on our hit list, and we go, it's a 2-year-old. Like, for per age class, those antlers are jumping, and they're getting psyched out, thinking this is just a great 3-year-old, and because their deer are healthy, and they're expressing more of the epigenetics. They can turn genes off and on, and so if you can get them to flip those genes on with groceries, wow, it's all about groceries. South Florida knows they can look on a calendar and they can put a mark. They know when there's going to be record book buckshot, a bump in Boone and Crockett deer. Because when they have a really good spring rain, they know 4 to 5 years later there's going to be a bump in Boone and Crockett deer. Because those fawns, the does, while they were having fawns, were off to the best start they could have. And those fawns are going to do really well. You'll probably notice that on years where we have a really bad EHD outbreak. A lot of times, it wipes out a third of the herd. And you're going, oh my gosh, they're never coming back. Watch out. 4 or 5 years later, there's going to be some monster buckshot because those fawns didn't have near as much competition for food, and they were healthier fawns for that neighborhood.
That's fascinating.
It is.
I want to go back to, we kind of touched on it. I think it's really important. If we're talking about habitat and this design, more of the food cover pattern that we can put on a property, the more critters we can pack in. And again, it's that design. How do we catch that deer on their feet during daylight? If we can put that cover really close to food, we've got a better chance of cutting that deer off because they don't have to move very far from cover to food. And they feel very safe because if they only have to go 50 yards, well, if they get out there to the food plot, they're going to go, well, I'm not far from cover. If danger comes, I can pull and get right back in there. That design of being able to get food close to cover, that is magic.
That's a good tip there. That's great. Daniel, anything else you want to cover or wanted to communicate or anything else you wanted us to ask you?
No, I think we've hit on a lot of good stuff. I mean, the habitat, and you can have great habitat, but we've got to implement the hunting strategy. And planning an effective hunt is real good. And how deer are using the habitat during the hunting season. During the rut, pre-rut, buckeyes aren't going to food as much. They still have to eat, but they're not, trying to pack calories on. They're looking for a receptive doe. So now, the limited resources, those travel corridors, those bottlenecks, and a receptive doe. Where's that receptive doe going to be? And how are bucks using the habitat or the terrain to get there?
Yeah.
So,
it's good, man.
You add the habitat design, the edges, and the bottlenecks that are created, that creates a really well-developed hunting plan for a property.
Good. Any more questions from you guys?
Oh,
Daniel, this has been awesome. I've been soaking this up every minute of it. Ben, did you have something else there?
No, I just loved his trigger finger when he was like, yeah, you got to control your trigger finger. That's what we got to do up here. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Let it fly on the does and hold up on the bucks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We were talking, that's a hard sell sometimes, particularly if there's multiple people who have access to it. And that's half the work is getting people on board with that in the particular area, at least controlling what you can. So.
And again, you start seeing those 2-year-olds jump up. They got those small bodies and those antlers look really big. A lot of times, those really good young deer will get shot because they really stand out. And so having that discipline and learning what's going on in your deer, really paying attention to those things will help you in the moment make, good decisions if that's your goal. It's all about what's your goal for hunting, guys hunting your place or what that is. And that's different for everyone. Everyone should get out and enjoy hunting regardless. So never want to hurt anyone for sure.
Man, this has been awesome, man. Daniel, thank you for your time. How do people get connected with you? Maybe someone's listened to this and been like, this is exciting, but my brain is exploding. I just want to call Daniel and I want him to help me. How does someone do that?
Yeah. You guys, anyone can find us on YouTube. Just search GrowingDeer.com. We're on Facebook and Instagram and X. If you're interested, we travel all across the country looking at properties. If you're really interested in that and really want to, dive really deep into this on your property, you can email us at info@growingdeer.com or we can get in touch that way.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, man. Really appreciate you being here.
I really enjoyed it, guys.
Hey there, thanks for watching this video. I'm JD, founder and crew member of the HUNTXP team. We're so grateful that you took time to watch this video and hopefully it's helping you level up your hunting game. That's what we in our community is all about, and we want to invite you into this growing community of hunters that's all about leveling up each other's hunting game. So the first thing you can do is like and subscribe, but even more than that, we got some fun things going on over at our website, HUNTXP.com. We'd love for you to join our community there and stay connected with what we're doing, what we're working on, and we'd love to hear about what you're after. So thank you for watching this video. We'll see you next time.
Behind the scenes bonus banter. And if you felt awkward about your South Dakota answer, I can edit it out.
I feel awkward about all of this.
You're doing great. You're doing great, man.
You're doing
Okay.
really good, dude. I know it's hard, but it's
Your
awesome.
your answer to so that's funny because the first Crockett news thing, I was like, I'm gonna throw this one to Ben just because I always answer these. Let's let Ben answer it. And then I was like, wait, I know Ben doesn't love to be put on the spot, but you did great.
Well,
You did good.
you could have said something about Crockett. I didn't even know what that is.
I've never told you about Crockett before.
No, you didn't.
Ben doesn't know what
That's
Ben
on me.
is. So
No,
Yeah, that's
Nope.
true. I shouldn't.
I
tell you.
just smiled and nodded my head.
Yeah, Crockett. Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I built a custom AI that acts as a hunting guide that we're trying to promote.
I
and
saw the
maybe we'll make-
advertisement. Yeah, you did with
Yeah.
that.
you can ask your phone, Crockett,
Gotcha.
and ask it like, hey, here's a piece of property I'm looking at. Where should I hunt? And it would spit out an answer. It would basically e-scout for you in a way.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I can tell the story on a later podcast, but I've never scored this one before. And I took a picture of it and I said, Crockett, give me your best bet of the score of that one. And it spit out like, I think it said like 149 something. And then I actually scored it because I'd never learned how to do that before. And it came out
152.
I was like, dang, that is amazing that you can just take a picture of a buck. It like gets a pretty accurate. It gave me all these qualifications. Like, I'm going to give you a range, but if you really want me to guess, I'm going to say 148 or something like that.
It's pretty good.
It was pretty crazy.
Was that rifle buck you shot in high school? Is that one?
Yeah, it's
I was there.
an old one.
I was there.
You were there.
You bet I was chasing that thing.
Were you on the drive?
Yeah, I
That's
was on
awesome.
the drive. I was chasing. I was the first one to meet you there. You shot it, and I was there. Yeah, I was
Sure.
tracking it. As he was live, I was tracking it. Following him in the whole way. And then you shot. And then I came to you and you're like, hey, dude, I just shot one. And I'm like, yeah, I know. I heard you. It's like 400 yards away, 300 yards away.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I
you were
thought
in the
I
Randy
thought it was
stand.
your dad.
No, you
was
were
I was in
Randy's
Randy's
stand
stand
too,
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was the whole play. I was in Randy's
Right.
stand, and then you
I
guys
didn't even know
were
where I
gonna
was
sleep
going.
in.
I was just following his tracks.
Funny.
Up the valley, up the draw.
Sent him right to me, and I blew his front leg off.
Did you?
And then he
Perfect.
almost gored me. Yeah,
That was a beautiful
he
deer.
almost gored me. I was an idiot and walked right up to him, and he still had his head up.
Yeah, you got out of your stand early because when I got there, after the shot, when I
Yeah,
came walking up, you were already there.
Immediately got out of my stand.
Yeah.
It was so dumb.
As soon as you
I
shot, I
I'm
was,
like, I'm coming down.
yeah, I ducked because I was, probably within 300 yards out of the bottom
So did it-
slash.
Yeah, and then I walked up to it, and then it bolted, and then I shot it again and killed it. But then you must have been like right behind me.
I was.
Wow.
Because you were standing there.
I
That's
was
awesome.
standing there. Maybe I'll tell that full story sometime, but it's not a proud one. It's pretty cool. I mean, I think whenever we talk about rifle hunting, I don't know if other people have this term, but the term mosey gets used a lot in the Larson shack. And I think it's actually a pretty decent tactic. And that's what happened that morning with that one.
I need to
Yeah.
get
No,
power
it's-
to my phone. Are you?
All right,
Yep.
you do that, man.
Because
text
Get a
him.
charge.
We're-
Yeah, just
I'm
get
not
a
sure.
charger and plug it in.
I can move. We're good.
Yeah.
I can. Okay. All right.